How prevalent is fake news? And I'm not talking about fake news as an abstract construct. I mean fabricated news stories that pass as credible news and which we therefore assume, wrongly as it turns out, are accurate, have been fact checked, and have some degree of objectivity and so on. I've already mentioned the BuzzFeed news study that showed that the top 20 fake news stories received more traction on Facebook in the months leading up to the presidential election than the top 20 news stories from legitimate journalistic outlets. Others have studied the scope and prevalence of fake news too. Let's look at two different takes on fake news. The researchers Hunt Alcott at NYU and Matthew Ginsko at Stanford University recently published a paper with the National Bureau of Economic Research that analyzed the impact of fake news on the presidential election. First, they assembled a database of fake news stories, then surveyed 1,200 people online about both fake news and true news stories. After some sophisticated statistical analysis, Alcott and Ginsko estimate that the average American remembered 0.92 pro-Trump fake news stories and 0.23 pro-Clinton fake news stories. Or as Bloomberg summarized Alcott's and Ginsko's findings, quote, not only did the average American remember no more than one fake story, but even smaller fractions of them actually believed it. Alcott and Ginsko conclude that to have changed the outcome of the presidential election, a single fake news story would have, quote, need to have had the same persuasive effect as 36 television campaign ads. Now let's take a look at a study that has reached a slightly different conclusion, though the subject matter is not strictly fake news. In early March, the Columbia Journalism Review published a study of how 1.25 million news stories circulated online over the course of the 2016 election. The study's authors, Yochai Benkler, Robert Ferris, Hal Roberts, and Ethan Zuckerman, analyzed the news stories' linking patterns, how they were shared on Facebook and Twitter, and the contents of the news stories. The conclusion of the Columbia Journalism Review? That a loose media network anchored around Breitbart News set the news agenda for the conservative media and fundamentally altered the broader news media ecosystem. About fake news, the researchers concluded, quote, rather than fake news in the sense of wholly fabricated falsities, many of the most shared stories can more accurately be understood as disinformation, the purposeful construction of true or partly true bits of information into a message that at its core is misleading. Here's where we stand. On one hand, any individual fake news story seems to not have had much impact in the election. On the other hand, the overall media ecosystem has dramatically altered in such a way that disinformation is a routine part of many Americans' news diet. So the question becomes, what can we do about this?